Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on building state-level relationships to support education agencies with disaster response and recovery planning. This webinar is hosted by your partners from the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Safe and Supportive Schools and its Readiness and Emergency Management for Schools Technical Assistance Center, also known as the REMTA Center. A sincere thank you for carving out time out of your busy schedule to join us today and for your continued dedication to your school community. Before we get started, we want to share the following tips about interacting with today's event. In the web links pod on your screen are relevant web pages. You may select the name of the web page you would like to see and click the Browse To button. We do encourage you to explore each of these pages, which you are also invited to share with others. As a reminder, there is no dial-in for this webinar. Audio is available via the link provided. If you experience any difficulty hearing the audio stream, we do encourage you to turn up your computer speaker volume at this time, or you may email info@remtacenter.org for technical support. Lastly, if you require closed captioning for this event, you will see the closed captioning or CC button on the top right of your screen. You may select that to activate the closed caption. The Q&A pod is also there for you to send any questions or messages throughout the event to our moderators and facilitators. Again, please send us questions at any time during the webinar, whether it's related to the presentation content or the REMTA Center in general, or any of the information you're hearing from our federal or state partners. We will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the event as time permits. If you have questions after the live event, you may send them to the REMTA Center in our help desk. Again, that email is info@remtacenter.org. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the REMTA Center website within 7 days following the event. I am so happy to introduce our presenters for today, including Christopher Tate from the U.S. Department of Education's Disaster Recovery Unit, Joe Anderson from the California Department of Education's Emergency Services Team, Lynn Olson from the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, also known as Cal OES, Tad Alexander from the Butte County Office of Education, and Monica McMillan from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Again, we're so happy to have them all with us here today. Let's take a brief moment to walk through our agenda. We will start in a moment with a discussion of why it's important to build those state-level relationships to support local response and recovery planning. We'll also, as a part of that portion, engage in a panel discussion with our partners here from the state of California, and we're really looking forward to that discussion. Again, we'll then save some time for any questions that you have regarding the information that's shared during today's event. And then we'll take some time to share a few key resources to support your work. Before we get started with the presentation, we would like to get a sense of whether you have heard of the REMTA Center before today's session. So we do have a poll session that we would like you to participate in, and let us know if you've attended a live training, a virtual training, perhaps you've requested technical assistance or downloaded a resource, or met us at a national conference, or via some other mechanism. And thank you so much for responding so far. It looks like a great bit of you have attended a virtual training, which we'd love to hear. If you have not attended any of the REMTA Center's virtual training and are interested in learning more, we encourage you to send us again an email at info@remtacenter.org. You can also visit our website and click the trainings tab to learn about the variety of training opportunities that we offer. We're also happy to hear that many of you have attended a live training as well and or requested technical assistance, downloaded a resource, and met us at a national conference. So we're so happy to have many existing friends with us here for today's event. The U.S. Department of Education's Office of Safe and Supportive Schools administers the REMTA Center to help build the preparedness capacity, including prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery efforts of schools, school districts, institutions of higher education, and their community partners at the local, state, and federal levels. We are here and available via phone and email to respond to your direct requests for technical assistance on a variety of topics, from questions about registering for upcoming webinars or scheduling a training event or topical inquiries about new issues in the field. Just remember that we are always here to support you with your needs. Okay, let's conduct another poll. We'd also like to get a sense of you and what your role is in supporting overall school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness. And so we will run another poll right now. And tell us a little bit more about yourself. Do you support an individual school with school safety, or perhaps a school district or multiple school districts? Perhaps you support a county office of education or regional education agency, or you work at the state education agency or emergency management or other state level agency level. We'd love to hear more about who's joining us today. And so far, it looks like we have a very good mix, which is awesome because the conversation really benefits practitioners at all of those levels. And we're so excited to have you hear what our partners from the California have to share about the efforts that they have taken to build those state-level relationships to support local response and recovery planning. So thank you again so much for participating in that poll. I am going to turn things now over to Christopher Tate so that we may get started with the presentation. Christopher?
Thank you, Janelle. Often when planning for local response and recovery, state education agencies, for a variety of reasons, are not always fully engaged in providing the information necessary to represent informed planning that considers each school community's unique needs and context. But as you know, it is the relationships that you have in advance that can be most instrumental in leading safe and effective recovery and response planning. Today, we will have an opportunity to examine a state-based implementation case study focused on how state-level relationship building improves response and recovery planning and creates much-needed efficiencies in the delivery of critical supports for school communities following a natural disaster. First, however, let's revisit the National Preparedness System and ensure a shared understanding of how school communities and the communities that they serve are rightfully situated within that system. The National Preparedness System lays out a path for school safety practitioners to collaborate with state and local emergency service providers to continuously enhance state and local capacities to respond to and recover from a natural disaster. Within each of the 5 missions, prevention, mitigation, protection, response, and recovery, state education agencies and emergency management agency partners are striving to ensure school safety every day, as well as to be ready to act and protect during and after a possible incident. As we examine strategies, we use the preparedness lens and consider ways we can collaborate to increase capacity within each of the preparedness missions using the paradigm before, during, and after. To protect the school community from injury, both physical and emotional, as well as from damage, and to facilitate continuity of operations, including the continuity of teaching and learning, we must prepare in advance for response and recovery. As you know, that means it's important for SEAs and other state-level emergency partners to collaborate and take meaningful steps during steady state to facilitate participation in state-based response and recovery working groups, but also to be prepared to support LEAs, local education agencies, with accessing assistance programs and taking the necessary action steps to support the school community. One attribute of school safety that is common with all activities supporting school safety before, during, and after possible emergencies is relationships. We know that building relationships is a powerful strategy for ensuring that the needs of our school communities are met following a natural disaster and that their interests are understood and thoughtfully represented during emergency planning. The sharing of information and expertise is critical to establishing productive state-level relationships to support response and recovery. Planning to aid school communities in reestablishing the learning environment following a natural disaster. Well before a plan for reestablishing the learning environment might be developed and adopted by a school system, state-level partners must come together, each bringing her own expertise to the table, to share information collected from local stakeholders about the various needs emerging from different parts of the community, including school communities. SEAs can play a pivotal role in supporting schools and the larger communities they serve during response and recovery as each school community starts to assess the impacts of an event physical and psychologically, on their schools, students, staff, and families. In identifying a single point of contact to coordinate the sharing of information and supports between the State Emergency Management Agency and the SEA, school communities are much more likely to have their unique needs articulated and advanced to others at the state and federal levels. Additionally, by having the SEA fully engaged during response and recovery, school communities are better situated to receive the delivery of appropriate state-level emergency services and other supports that are informed by local educational perspectives and appropriately adapted to the communities that they are intended to support. These relationships are reciprocal in nature. Just as school communities can rely on SEAs to represent their needs following a disaster, state emergency management agencies can benefit from the support of SEAs in assisting school communities to access federal grant program funding such as FEMA's Public Assistance Program and technical supports provided through the Federal Recovery Support Functions following presidentially declared disasters. As we will learn during today's discussion, building stronger relationships with an understanding of the roles and relationships of the different state and local players aiming to support school communities in the preparation for and response to a natural disaster can only help to ensure that we're speaking the same language, asking the right questions of each other and local community members, and most importantly, providing meaningful local support. After the wildfires of 2017 and 2018, California's Department of Education doubled down on its support for impacted school communities by taking an active role in collaborating with their state emergency management partners to share information, provide technical expertise, and ensure that local school systems were receiving critical support that were appropriate for their operating context. CDE, upon being connected and engaged with the GFO, and visiting school districts to better assess the work happening locally to reopen schools and ensure that the vital functions they serve in their communities could resume, knew that the SEA lacked the resources to support the number of impacted school communities. So building relationships with their state partners and trust with impacted local school leaders was necessary to adequately support community preparedness and proactively support the resolution of issues arising during and after disasters. To facilitate today's discussion and introduce today's panelists, I now turn things over to you, Janelle.
Thank you so much, Christopher. As Christopher just shared, following the wildfires of 2017 and 2018, California's Department of Education took a more active role in collaborating with their state emergency management partners to share information, provide technical expertise, and ensure that local school systems were receiving critical support that was appropriate for their operating context. And for that reason, we are so excited to be joined by partners from the California Department of Education, Cal OES, and the Butte County Office of Education to engage in a panel discussion today around the importance of building state-level relationships to support local response and recovery planning. As I mentioned at the start of our webinar, we are joined today by Joe Anderson from the California Department of Education's Emergency Services Team, Lynn Olson from Cal OES, and Tad Alexander, Associate Superintendent from the Butte County Office of Education. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Joe, Lynn, and Tad.
Great. This is Joe. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, Joe, I was just going to turn things to you. I would love to get the conversation started with you, Joe. I know that you support the emergency services team within CDE and that your emergency services team and its department operations center is activated to support and monitor ongoing wildfire activity occurring in multiple areas throughout the state and affecting K-12 schools and school districts. We'd love to have you describe how CDE and Cal OES work in collaboration to provide those supports. And also, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, I'll start with the latter. So just about myself, I have, I come from actually Cal OES prior to my time here at CDE. I spent about 10 years working in emergency management there, in mitigation and preparedness mostly, and, in recovery as well. Also, I have 1 year of experience here. Our team is relatively new. We just developed this team last October because of the obvious need for emergency management within education in California. Yeah, and we've had an active role at CDE since about 2017, maybe 2016, at the State Operations Center, which is run by Cal OES. And what they do, they respond to the disasters that happen throughout the state. So we've just been noticing that many schools have been impacted over these past few years by these increasing severity of disasters and also increasing frequency of disasters. So we're kind of treating this as the new normal as far as, we do anticipate things will keep happening. We just need to be more prepared and be better educated when these disasters happen and have better communication, which is one of the main reasons that my team was developed in the first place. So that's kind of where we come from, and that's who I am. So the first question you asked, how do we coordinate with Cal OES? So right now we are actually activated, as you said, with our Department Operations Center, and the State Operations Center is also activated over at Cal OES. So we do participate in that as well, where we have a seat at the table with Cal OES and other state partners regarding emergency management. That way we make sure that schools are included in the discussion and are considered in response actions. So we are currently there right now. We work pretty much almost every day. There are long hours there, but it's totally worth it, and it's great being able to assist the schools there. And we communicate regularly with different people within Cal OES, including Lynn Olson, who is our main contact we communicate with, whenever there's an issue going on with schools, just for situational awareness, usually. Or sometimes we're able to provide resources to each other to kind of help out these schools in their greatest time of need. And one of the biggest things that we do in the team is we communicate. We also coordinate and collaborate, the 3 C's that's what I call them. And when we do that, like when there's a disaster, we will reach out to the schools directly and to the county offices of education that are over the LEAs in their counties. And we will meet as frequently as daily, during the beginning of that response phase. That way we make sure that we maintain that situational awareness and we can adjust to the situation because we realize things change very quickly during the beginning phases of response. We also coordinate by reaching out to the county offices of education and the LEAs sometimes directly to explore their needs and kind of figure out what exactly do they need, because sometimes they don't know right off the bat, but we'll coordinate, meetings between other counties that have had the same situation with them, so that way they can kind of work out the issues together. And finally, we do collaborate. We make sure that we get the state and federal partners involved as needed to be able to match up those resources with those who are in need. And that's generally what we do. And with that, I will turn over to Lynn, kind of introduce herself and kind of say from her perspective what we do when we work together for schools.
All right, thank you, Joe, for that. So I am Lynn Olson. I'm the program manager here at Cal OES in the planning division. Here in the planning division, we're responsible for the catastrophic planning effort here within California. I have been assisting the California Department of Education. Really, we've been supporting them for many years, but really actively together since 2017 with the Oroville Dam emergency spillway incident, where we had to evacuate 188,000 people within a matter of hours. Luckily, schools were not in session at the time. But in 2017, we also had the Tubbs fire in Sonoma County, which was the first time that we saw schools that were damaged or destroyed on a large scale. Prior to 2017, CDE kind of had a hands-off approach. In California, we have the standardized emergency management system. All emergencies are local and controlled at the local level. CDE kind of had the position that, we're here to support you, but, they didn't reach out near as much as they have. But since 2017, they've taken a whole new approach to disasters, and they've taken a very active role in supporting schools. If we need to, we can have a school task force set up here at Cal OES where we bring in FEMA, we can bring in Cal Recycle, we can bring in Air Resources Board or any of the people that we need from other state agencies to support or ask questions or answer questions for the school district. And I don't want to get into a big long discussion, but I will just say one of the most important things that we've done is that the governor and the director have both said that schools have priorities. So when it comes to recovery, whatever the schools need in order to get back up and running, we will make that a priority to make that happen because we know that schools are very important to a community and that trying to get back that sense of normal is to get kids back in school. So with that, I will stop right there, and I guess I'll introduce Tad Alexander from Butte County Office of Education, who has become a good friend over the years.
Thanks, Lynn. Whether, unlucky or not is, I guess, probably a good way to put it, but Lynn's mentioned a number of the opportunities that Butte County has had to engage in different disasters, starting back in February 2017 with the Oroville spillway disaster and having fires and floods since then. We have lost a number of schools and been involved with public assistance through FEMA and Cal OES for the past 4 years. So we have had an opportunity to engage in all these different services with both groups. And I think Lynn's probably hit the nail on the head as far as one of the most important things is to recovery is getting the schools back in place, especially for rural communities. That is where everything happens and where everybody comes to try to get their services in place. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Joe, Lynn, and Tad. And you both all shared some very powerful pieces of information, particularly the point that you made, Lynn, about schools being prioritized. We know that schools not only serve as learning centers, but also community centers, as you pointed to, Tad. Thinking about what you shared, Joe, in those 3 C's, that really stuck with me: communicate, collaborate, and coordinate. Do you mind talking a little bit about any tools or strategies that you use to collectively to maintain communication with Cal OES and or other state or county partners?
Yeah, no problem. So one of the tools that we use is called the SITSTAT report or the situational status report. This is something that really originated at Cal OES and we've kind of adopted over at CDE. While we do provide a portion of that information, like which schools are impacted by the disaster directly to Cal OES, we also have kind of an internal one that we share, just with CDE and the State Board of Education and other, educational partners that are more internal to the state level education, agencies. So in that, we kind of tell that story of, hey, here's what's going on with all the schools, here's everyone who's impacted, and here's what their needs are right now. So that way it creates this great situational picture where everyone kind of knows what's going on, because one of our shortfalls before is that we just really had a lack of, that picture of what's going on. We didn't really know of what was happening at each of these schools unless we reached out directly to them. So in this way, we are reaching out directly to them still, but we are sharing that information with everybody involved. So that's one of our tools to maintain that communication side of it. We do have many resources on our website currently, on the CDE website, under our emergency management page that are specific to disasters. So if there's a wildfire or something like that, they just have to click on that, the wildfire disaster, and link, and then it'll give them a bunch of resources, both state level and federal level as well. And some things are like specific to air quality or cleanup, and those are things that we've developed with other partners in education. And then there's SIRS, and I guess I'll talk about SIRS later. Well, actually, I guess we're there now. Did you want to go ahead and talk about SIRS, or have me talk about it?
Do you mind telling us a little bit about your school emergency reporting system? And I know that it's designed to support information sharing between CDE and LEAs, such as Butte County Office of Education. We'd love for you to share a little bit about that now.
Absolutely. So SIRS is pretty much brand new. It just got released a couple of weeks ago, but it's something that's been in development for, ever since I've been here. And it stands for the School Emergency Reporting System. And in this, it creates a method for us to communicate directly with the LEAs to, on the state level, to see what their needs are and what's going on, if their schools are closed, if their staff are impacted, if the school is impacted by the disaster as far as is it damaged or destroyed. So because they're able to do this directly now, we can get this information right away, even before we hear it from the media, because that's usually, when we would hear it before, is if the school didn't reach out to us directly, if the school is damaged or destroyed, we would hear it to the news. And we understand that during the response phase, time is a valuable, limited resource. So the sooner we can get in contact with these schools about the resources they need, the faster they can recover. And it could actually mitigate some of the other problems that may come with response, or with the lack of response. So anyway, what this thing does, every LEA in the state, which are 2,279 of them now, have their unique login codes where they can access the system. And it's very simple. They can self-report and just say, hey, these are the schools that are impacted in this LEA. These are how they're impacted, and they're just yes or no questions. We kept it very simple intentionally in case, they're on the move, and they can do it on the phone if they need to. And then they're pretty much done with it at that part, and they just have to update it once they're out of that, disaster phase. Also, there's a way we can reach out directly. My team is pretty good with GIS, so we will take the GIS maps for schools and whatever the disaster event is, whether it be a fire, earthquake, whatever it is. And we'll see all the schools within that area or near that area, and we'll reach out to all of them through the system. And then those schools only have to, click on the link that they get sent from the system, and then they have to, answer those yes or no questions. So that way it gives everyone a situational picture of all the schools in California, and it happens quickly, which is great. So we've already been testing it out in the past couple of weeks since it's been live, and it's been, it's worked very well, actually. We have everyone who's impacted by a disaster currently on there, and eventually we will have a public-facing site, which is going to allow, the media, parents, other schools, other agencies to see the status of schools, see who's closed based on which disaster, and that's pretty much a summary of what the whole system is. But it definitely builds that resource of being able to communicate and coordinate resources with all schools throughout California from the state level.
That sounds like such a valuable tool in that state level relationship building, but also in working with the local emergency management offices and those county offices of education. We're, again, so lucky to have Tad Alexander here from the Butte County Office of Education, one of your 58 offices of education in the state. Tad, if you don't mind, can you spend a little bit of time describing your role as well as the role of Butte County in supporting schools in the event of a federally declared disaster?
Sure. And prior to that, though, I'd like to just add a little bit on to what Joe was saying about SERS and how important that is from a local level. Prior to SERS existing, that's what we would have to do is we were filling out spreadsheets, and I had a single person calling and talking to everybody to try to pull all that information together and submit it in a way that was useful for both the state and the federal emergency folks. And that was just so they could figure out what we needed and how best to serve us. With SERS in place, it's something we can dump across quickly. It goes to everybody that needs it. I had a whole person dedicated to pulling that information together back in 2017, and it has freed us up quite a bit. So, Joe, thanks for putting that work into that. It's going to be super helpful for us in the future. All right. Now, you were asking me to describe my role. I think the best way to describe how the County Office of Education's role is a liaison. So what we do is we work between the two, between the states and the feds to bring in the services that are needed for our local folks. And it frees up our local folks at the district level to work on what they need to. Keep in mind that if a district was impacted by the fire, more than likely, people in that immediate area have either lost their house or are responding to emergency in some way. And so that doesn't free them up to, they need to deal with their personal life as well as deal with the school life. And that's where we can step in and support them and help them figure out best what they need, and then take that up the chain of command to bring in the resources that are necessary. And that is something that we've gotten really good at over the years, is interacting with Cal OES and FEMA and recognizing the language that is necessary in order to request and get things for our unmet needs. And I think that's probably one of the key things is learning that language and figuring out how best to ask for those services to help out your school districts.
Thank you for sharing that, Tad. And you mentioned just now that collaboration and coordination with Cal OES and with FEMA. And I know that one of the areas around which you would collaborate would be conducting site assessment, or those walkthroughs of damaged school buildings or grounds following a federally declared disaster. So thinking specifically about that, Lynn, can you talk a little bit about the role that Cal OES would play in supporting county offices of education and individual schools with conducting those walkthroughs of damaged school buildings and grounds?
Certainly. So again, I mentioned earlier that we have the standardized emergency management system here in California, and that means all special districts, to include schools, are to work with their local county office of emergency services for mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And I can tell you that before 2017, that probably was not well known among the school districts. So we've done a lot of education with the school districts and connecting them with their Office of Education and the school district with their county offices of emergency services. After a disaster, one of the first things they do is initial damage estimates, where the county goes out and tries to assess the amount of damage, because it takes a certain threshold in order to get that FEMA declaration. So the county will initially do the damage estimates, and it's just a real quick, spreadsheet or forms that they fill out. And then eventually Cal OES will send out a team that will work with the county to do these individual, more formal damage assessments to try to get to that threshold so that we can have a FEMA declaration. So it really is a joint effort between the county, between the cities, the special districts, FEMA, that all go out there to do these damage estimates.
Thank you so much for describing that, Lynn. We want to take some time now to talk a little bit about the benefits of state-level collaboration, particularly when looking at the entire recovery continuum. So that preparedness work that's ongoing, looking at short-term, which is, within the days following an event, intermediate, which is the weeks and months, and then long-term, the months to years. Pat, I want to turn things back to you to see if you can describe from that county office of education perspective some of the benefits of that collaboration with your state-level partners, particularly as it relates to that entire recovery continuum.
Sure. I think one of the best things, or one of the things we need to recognize, is we all work for bureaucracies. And when you work for a bureaucracy, there's lots of red tape and lots of rules to follow, and things that can that are necessary but can also slow down the recovery process, especially during your immediate response. And I think the collaborations in place with Cal OES and CDE, one of the main things we've developed over time is an ability to move some of those out of the way in the short term in order to assist with immediate response and to help us move into recovery. Executive orders is something that CDE has helped us with in the past, whether we're trying to figure out how to work on pulling in our ADA and determining, how are we going to account for the kids that are in school, or the learning loss, and how we're going to deal with that. We have state mandates on what we must do, but then CDE can step in and work with the governor to get an executive order in place that makes it possible for us to move forward in the recovery. Especially a good example of that was during the Camp Fire, when we had to do recovery from a housing standpoint. Where are we going to put kids back to school? How are we going to give them something stable? Especially because that stability helps with the mental health of the student and the mental health of the public in general. We were able to put 11 schools in place, or 11 school buildings, I should say, in 11 days, with the help of CDE and the help of a bunch of local community members. So that's where the collaboration, the community component comes in. You need everybody to come together and recognize that there is a short-term immediate need that you have to respond to, and then you also need that help moving some of the red tape out of the way so the recovery process can begin.
Very important point that you just made there. Lynn, would you like to add anything to that, or just to talk a bit more about why it's important for that collaboration to be sustained and cultivated throughout the continuum?
Yeah, I think, Tad did a good example there, again, with the executive orders. When there are immediate needs that, the governor can do an executive order to cut through the red tape. I know that was important when they were establishing one of the schools that were next to an airport, because I think you're not supposed to be able to do that, but we were able to get waivers in order to set that school up. But for the long term, I mean, even today, I still get calls from Tad or from somebody saying, hey, we still have this incident. Do you know who to talk to? Who can I call? You have to remember that throughout this whole process, at least at the local district, you have to have people dedicated to response. Because like he said, it is days, weeks, and months. And FEMA people will come and go. State people will come and go. But usually the locals are there throughout the whole incident, and there needs to be some of that continuity of, what happened, when it happened, why did it happen, so it's not like you're having to start from scratch all the time when you have an incident or something that you need to discuss. So it's been a really good relationship. We were also just able to bring FEMA in they called it the hub. Butte County called it their hub. So we were able to bring in CDE and FEMA representatives and local representatives to meetings to work through issues, to discuss the process, because it was really new to Butte County and to other counties. They've never done this before. Hopefully they'll never have to do it again. But it is a whole new learning process, and it can be very overwhelming. So we try to make it as simple as possible for the counties that are going through these emergencies. So hopefully I kind of answered your question there.
You did. Thank you so much, Lynn. And you made a very good, important point. I know a phrase that we often hear in the field of school safety, emergency management, security, and preparedness is that all emergencies are local. So your point about those local partners was very critical. In the event of an emergency, a school or school district may need to access grant funding to support continuity of operations, teaching, and learning. And I know that Federal Emergency Management Agency's Public Assistance Program is an example of one federal grant program available to support education institutions in the event of an emergency. And we are so lucky to have Monica McMillan from FEMA, who will share a little bit more about that program in a few. But I do want to turn things back to Tad again. As an education agency with experience, would you like to share any final lessons learned or success strategies that you would recommend?
Yes, I think one of the things I'd like everybody to know is that it takes a team to respond to an emergency. Not just a team with FEMA, not just a team with Cal OES, who are set up to respond to emergencies and are too deep and have their teams in place ready to respond. But at the local level, we need to be prepared to step in and help our districts out and respond at the county level. And having that team in place is important. Whether you're trying to go through public assistance and working on pulling all the documentation together that is necessary, or working in the portal, it takes multiple people to do it. No one should think that they can assign one person to handle all that public assistance or handle all the information that's coming in from either Cal OES or from FEMA. It does take a number of people to do that. The other part of that I'll put out there is burnout is a real thing. And local LEAs aren't set up too deep with emergency personnel to respond to this. So they not only have to learn a new language, a new process, a new system, but then they have to try to do that with their other job. So I think that's one thing I would stress for the folks that are out there at the county level or at the district level is try to pull together a team so that you can respond to this, or you will have burnout at the staff level, and then you'll be stagnated.
Thank you. That's such an important point to share here, Tad, and I think it's one that's often forgotten as a part of this conversation. Joe, would you like to add anything to what Tad has shared regarding those lessons learned or success strategies?
I think between Tad and Lynn, they've covered quite a bit of good material. I don't know if there's really a lot more I can add to what they said. Just that, talking about the short-term recovery, versus the intermediate versus long-term, the situation does change for each one of those. Like, for example, in the short term, it's really everyday meeting, figuring out what those needs are as they change and figuring out how to meet them and during the response phase. And then as the recovery really kicks in, then that's where the real work comes in. You're not worried about life and safety as much as you are worried about getting things back to the way they were. So I would say that constant communication is really important on all levels, maybe not every day at that point, but definitely on a regular basis until the issues are resolved. So that's all I have to add to that. But yeah, I think they covered it great. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And Lynn, would you have any final lessons learned or success strategies that you would like to recommend?
Yes, thank you. So just everybody knows, I'm sure they understand, that recovery starts about the same time that the incident starts, especially if there are big incidents. If you're not thinking about recovery from the very beginning, you probably should. And like Tad said, I do understand that there's, you just don't always have enough people to do all the things that you need to do, but you do need to have, recovery in the back of your mind. You also need to understand that not all disasters receive a federal declaration, and that, you may not be able to get those grant funds or grant funds, and that your decision should not be made based on whether or not you can get FEMA funding. They say that all the time, do what you have to do, but if your answer to why did you spend this money was because we thought we were going to get recovery funds, is not going to fly. So not all disasters are federal disasters, so keep that in mind. And then my only last comment would be for the federal side is that everyone should know and review the Papa G that FEMA puts out, and I think we're going to talk about that here in a minute, but that document is good to have, to know, to at least look through and read through, so you have a basic understanding of what it is that you are going to be asked to do, or the forms or the documentation that you're going to be having to keep track of. And it's good for a state disaster, even for a local disaster. There's some good information in there. So have it, at least review it, and then hope that you never have to use it.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And that's the perfect segue into our next section. Thank you again to all of our state partners for participating in that discussion and for sharing your lessons learned, strategies, and perspectives. I am so happy now to turn things over to Monica McMillan from the Federal Emergency Management Agency to provide more information on the FEMA Public Assistance Program. Monica, over to you.
Oh, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can.
Sweet. And yeah, you're right, Lynn. That was definitely the perfect segue. That was the first key part of my little presentation. Yeah, so I'll be talking about the public assistance program, specifically targeted at education organizations and facilities. So right there is the Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide. It's an extremely useful resource for both applicants and recipients, and it definitely should be that first tool in your toolbox as you prepare yourself to coordinate with your state education agencies and your state public assistance offices to take on the public assistance program. Yeah, hopefully you never have to use it, right? But taking a look at it, reviewing it is really going to help you understand what is potentially eligible in the future, who is an eligible applicant, and what is eligible work that can be claimed, and what are eligible costs. Because not everything is eligible depending on if you are a special education district or like a private nonprofit. So it provides a very good overview of the public assistance program and the implementation process. It's also really important to pay attention to the version that you're taking a look at. You really want to access the version that was in effect when your event was declared. So right there on the front, you'll see effective June 1st, 2020. That's version 4 that just came out. It's updated on a regular basis. You may see if you're Googling or using your favorite internet browser to find information, if version 3.1 pops up or version 4, you want to make sure you pay attention to that date on the front so you have the most updated copy. All right, next one. Next slide, thanks. Cool, perfect. So who is eligible for public assistance? So it is a state, tribe, territory, government or agency, local governments, agencies, and special governing districts, and certain nonprofits. So for education organizations, what does this mean? So a state or a local government school district or a special governing district could be eligible. For private nonprofits, for certain private nonprofits, you have to meet certain criteria that is laid out in the Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide. In order to submit your request for public assistance, you do have to have some backup documentation. So that could mean a letter that proves your 501c or E status, or documentation from your state, tribe, or territory stating that you are a non-revenue producing nonprofit entity. And so based on the update that just happened in 2018, version 3.1, nonprofit, so private nonprofit education facilities that meet some defined criteria are eligible without regard to religious character or use for religious instruction. So the defined criteria is on that page that's listed right there, so page 45 of version 4. But I'll go over it a little bit. So for primary and secondary education schools, they have to be designated that under state law and also provide day or residential school, including parochial schools, are eligible. And then for higher education institutions, they must meet 4 defined criteria. So admit students with a high school diploma or equivalent, are legally authorized to provide an education beyond the secondary level, award some form of degree, so that's a bachelor degree, a 2-year degree, or a 1-year training program, and are nationally accredited. So all of that is laid out in the PA Program and Policy Guide pages that are listed right there. All right, next slide. We're going to talk about eligible work as well. So eligible work for category A and B, or emergency work, are activities that save lives, protect public health and safety, protect improve property, or eliminate or lessen an immediate threat of damage. So those 2 categories for emergency work are debris removal and emergency protective measures. And it's important to make sure you're showing that these happened on your maintained property. So they're your responsibility. You're not just doing it kind of like Lynn was saying because FEMA's in town and you think you might get paid for it. You have to be able to prove that it's your maintained property, it's your responsibility. So those are a couple of examples on the screen. I do have limited time, so you can jump into page 97 through 139 to kind of read more information about category A and B. So next slide. Something that is a little bit more in-depth, something that we may not have seen before, is what's happening with COVID-19. So temporary and emergency barriers and signage that contribute to social distancing, cleaning, contaminated surfaces in preparation for reopening or after contact with an eligible case, and some opening and operating activities. Those aren't necessarily defined in the PA Program and Policy Guide, but if you look at the bottom of the slide, we have a lot of policy that's come out recently that will really explain some of those more activities in detail. And that's all provided at the end of the training as well, too. You'll have access to those links. Next slide. And then the last thing I want to talk about is, so sorry about that. The top of this slide should say permanent work. So it's not emergency work. Right now we're going to talk about permanent work, which is category C through G. So that's anything that repairs, it's permanent actions that repair a facility back to pre-disaster design, size, capacity, and function in accordance with applicable code and standards. So with schools, that's going to be that cost that repairs that building to pre-disaster condition, or the cost to resupply, restock materials or supplies that were lost in a hurricane or a tornado, that kind of event. Generally, category E is what schools will really associate most with, but it could be that category G, parks, recreation, and other facilities could be eligible work as well. But if you jump into the PA Program Policy Guide, is going to be that best tool to utilize to understand the PA process. Because I know 5 minutes is really fast to go on an overview. So I'm going to hand it back to Janelle, I know I have some questions coming to me later on.
Thank you so much, Monica, for sharing that. And as Monica mentioned, it is now time for our question and answer session. And I know that some of you may have some questions for our presenters, and we will take some time to answer those now. The first question I would like to direct to you, Monica. We have a participant who would like to know who they can contact at FEMA to learn more about the availability of TA program case data for educational institutions.
That is a really great question, and I did reach out to our reporting and analytics department to kind of get some more information about that. But the best people to reach out to would be their state public assistance offices to get more information about, other education facilities in their own state. That's a little bit more relevant data on what's eligible within their state, because the public assistance program is run through the recipient. So the recipient would be that state, tribe, or territory that's received the presidential declaration. And so the state or the tribal or the territorial emergency management department will be running the disaster. So kind of like Cal OES coordinates with the California Department of Education. Cal OES helps the different education facilities or different applicants determine what is eligible and what can be submitted to FEMA. So if you're looking for specific data on that end, the state would be the best person to reach out to. But I will definitely report back to y'all with whatever information I get from the reporting and analytics department on if there's maybe like a national way to pull that kind of data.
Yeah. Hi, this is Lynn from Cal OES, and I would like to say yes, that we have public assistance people, and it's also on our webpage for those in California. But I just want to remind people, too, that your state public assistance folks are your advocate. They are the ones that fight for you with FEMA. They go to battle with FEMA on a regular basis to make sure that we get everything it is that we think, that we qualify for. So it's very important to work with your state public assistance folks.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lynn. We do have another question for our partners from the state of California. And the participant would like to know what was the first step in building that relationship between the state education agency and the state emergency management agency? I guess I'll turn that to you, Lynn and Joe.
So
yeah,
what was
I'll
the first?
Defer to Lynn. Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
So what was the first steps in building that relationship? Is that the question? So basically, I mean, we have a position here at Cal OES that supports school planning. Like I said, it has been a little less than more prior to 2017. But once we had the Oroville Dam incident and once we had the Tubbs fire in Sonoma County, that kind of spurred Department of Education to work with us a little more closely on emergencies and disasters. And since then, CDE has been a great partner with me personally, and we have done numerous presentations to numerous state educational agencies, conferences, whether they're facility folks, superintendent folks. We've been working with a lot of the insurance groups for schools as well to get the information out about emergency management in California. And we are in the process of publishing a document for schools, California Emergency Management for Schools, a guide for districts and sites to help them navigate through emergency management and mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So we have been working very close and working very hard to get the information out. Now we have Joe and Jake on board at CDE who will continue to take that message forward.
Yeah, this is Joe. I have really nothing to add to that other than since I've been here, Cal OES has been great at reaching out to us whenever there's, somebody that's reached out to them or there's a need that they're seeing, and we will, work together on addressing whatever that need is. We've been part of many task forces, including the schools task force, where we've co-led, this assignment together. where we get on board everyone who has to do anything with education within California, including higher education, into this group. So we can address the needs, like for example, during COVID, address all those needs for PPE and testing around the state. So yeah, I mean that's some of the ways that we've been working together very closely, and we want to make sure that if it's emergency management related, that we're on the same page, or we're calling everything the same thing, so that way we're speaking the same language the entire time. And it's definitely helped out a lot with getting services to schools who needed them.
Do you make school emergency data available as spatial data that other partners can include in existing GIS mapping applications?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's actually part of what we're going to be doing for the upgrade to SIRS. So the SIRS that we have out right now is very basic. It's just, the bare bones of what the system can be. In phase 2 of this system, we're going to be building out the GIS portion of it, where it's going to be kind of like, I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but CAL FIRE here in the state has a map where they show all the different incidents within California. So that way, anybody can just kind of look at that map, see what's going on in California and where at any given time. They just have to click and see what's going on. That is a little bit down the road. We're not quite there yet. We're still building up that capability at this time. But obviously, if anybody's looking for any information on a specific school, our CDE databases have the GIS information for each of those schools, so that is available to that extent, at least for now. But we are going to be building that out as time goes on.
Awesome. And I have one final question for you, Monica. Participants would like to know where they can find information on permanent work that's eligible under the FEMA PA program, or that falls generally under Category E.
Yeah, for sure. The best place to get more information on permanent work that's eligible is going to be the PA PPG, PA Program and Policy Guide. The most recent version is version 4, and it is starting on page 171 for those of y'all following along at home. So, and there's also, there's a Unit 9, which is Eligibility Considerations by Facility, where you read a little bit more in depth on different eligibility considerations you may have for the different types of buildings that you are interested in claiming.
Thank you, Monica. And thank you to all of our presenters as well as our participants for submitting those questions. We want to extend a special thank you to you. As Monica mentioned, we have shared various resources throughout this PowerPoint and via the web links pod. We encourage you to download them. You can also access these resources on the archive page on the REMCA Center website, where this webinar will be provided for your access later. Just a reminder that the REMCA Center, we are here to support you with your technical assistance needs. Again, please feel free to reach out to us via phone or email if you need support, and also to follow us on Twitter so that you can remain up to date on resources that we're sharing, virtual engagement opportunities, and so much more. Again, a special thank you to all of our presenters from the U.S. Department of Education, FEMA, and the state of California. We truly appreciate your collaboration and all of the lessons learned, strategies, and perspectives that you shared today. Thank you to everyone for joining today's webinar.